Tensions remain high in the Middle East with Israel's ongoing war with Hamas, attacks on shipping vessels in the Red Sea, and now that deadly drone attack on a base in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. service members.
The U.S. is vowing to retaliate, and word is that President Biden has approved a series of strikes against targets in Iraq and Syria.
Joining us now to break all of this down is Javed Ali, Associate Professor of Practice at the Ford School of Public Policy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Terrence and Shana, thank you for having me again.
So, Javed, as we've discussed before, Iran seems to be the common denominator in many of these conflicts, particularly the ones just mentioned, but never direct conflicts or engagement with the United States. Where do you see all of this going? Is there any chance of a direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran in the foreseeable future?
Well, Shana, that's an excellent question. And the United States and Iran have been engaged in this shadow war against each other for now more than 40 years, since the beginning of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1997 after the revolution. So this is a continuation of an on again, off again pattern we've seen throughout the decades, but now things have escalated like they've escalated in the past, because once you have the death of U.S. troops or government personnel anywhere in the world, and you can link it back to Iran, then there's going to be some accountability for that. And already we've heard that President Biden has approved some set of retaliatory strikes. It appears that those strikes will not just be limited to one target. Both the National Security Council spokesperson and the Secretary of Defense today basically said that there is a wave of targets that will, or a wave of strikes that will happen probably in Iraq and Syria, either against these militant groups or Iranian controlled targets as well. So this thing could escalate very, very quickly, and no one knows what the next cycle will look like.
There are some who are pushing for the U.S. to take a more direct approach. If that were to happen, what could that look like?
Well, we've seen an example where the U.S. really raised the game in terms of striking something significant within Iran when, if your viewers remember, in January 2020, when tensions were very high back then as well, into 2019, into 2020, arguably the second most important and powerful person in Iran, the Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani, he was killed in Iraq in a U.S. military strike, and President Trump came out the next day or that evening and announced it, and that really ratcheted tensions up too. Now, he wasn't killed in Iran, but he was killed in Iraq. And again, second most powerful person in the country. And no one knew in the immediate aftermath of that, what would Iran do in response? One of the things they did do, which we found out, is they launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles at a U.S. Joint U.S.-Iraqi air base called Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. Luckily, no one got killed in that, but all the missiles that were launched hit the intended point. So if the U.S. and whatever this next series of strikes will be, if there is a target that's very significant to Iran, whether that facility or person is in Iran, in Iranian territory or elsewhere, that's one potential kind of response, a ballistic missile launch. But Iran can do things in the Persian Gulf. We've seen, obviously, the proxy forces that they are partnered with, and the ability of Iran to control them is another open question. And then Iran also has a cyber warfare capability that they've used in the United States going back a decade. It hasn't been physically destructive, but they were able to achieve some effect. So, and I could go on and on and on. Iran has a long list of things they could do, but no one knows what we are going to do next that would then trigger another series of escalation on their side.
So for all of the poking of the bear, it seems, that Iran has been responsible for, it seems like there is a consensus that Iran does not want an all-out war with the United States. So how would you describe exactly what Iran does want? What is that priority, and what is the long-term goal?
Well, the long-term goal, and it's been the goal for decades, is to basically spread Iran's influence throughout the region, the Middle East, if not other parts of the world, at the expense of the United States, and weakening U.S. influence and prestige, and also at the same time trying to damage Israel's security. So Iran is always trying to achieve multiple objectives, but over the past 20 years, certainly with what happened in the Iraq War, with getting rid of Saddam Hussein and taking Iran's #1 enemy kind of off their immediate level of concern. If anything, Iran has grown more emboldened and since then, and has armed all these militant and proxy groups in the region, to include Hamas and the Gaza Strip. They are now these militant groups and proxy groups have been operating at a higher level of attacks in the region, to include those against the U.S. And we saw the results of one of those, sadly, on Sunday in the attack in Jordan. And this is one of the questions for Iran. Are they willing to rein these groups in, or is this scenario that we're all seeing unfolding in front of our eyes every day, is this really what they want? I do agree. I don't think they want direct war with the United States, but at the same time, this level of conflict in this three-dimensional battle space that the U.S. and Israel find themselves in now, this also is probably something that Iran is happy about. So it's a really complicated issue, and no one truly understands how to get into the mind of the supreme leader of Iran. It's like trying to understand what Vladimir Putin is doing in Russia or Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I mean, these are very closed governments and societies. So I do think what's happening so far is playing into the Iranian strategy, but at the same time, they're trying to make sure they don't get drawn into an all-out war with either the United States or Israel.
Yeah, extremely complex situation. We do appreciate your insight and help us understanding all of it. Javed Ali, Associate Professor of Practice at the Ford School of Public Policy. Thanks so much for your time today.
All right, thank you.